Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, this phone has been out for a little bit of time now, and the thing I will definitely tell you for the most part is that these particular devices were very interesting when they first came out, and I don't know if these would be the first phones I'd recommend a majority of people to buy. We'll talk about that throughout this whole entire video, but if you want to pick up some phones or the top devices that I would recommend buying in the used market, you can get them from the links down in the description on Amazon, and you can help support the channel at the same exact time. So the first thing I want to start off with is the concept of these phones are very interesting because they are flipping phones with flipping mechanisms. So you have to kind of compare these phones against the competition in a different way because there's a lot more technology and different things that this phone is going for that the standard flip bar phone like an iPhone or a Google Pixel or one of those types of phones aren't really going for, even the standard Galaxy S, the series that we have. Now with the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3, as you can see, it has a flat side to it. When it's folded, it's a little bit different, but when it's unfolded, that display inside is a 6.7-inch foldable dynamic AMOLED display. The top display, the cover display, is a little bit smaller, so it's a 1.9-inch Super AMOLED display, and that panel is also very good. I like that panel a lot. It's very sharp and it looks nice for it being a cover display, but that unfolded one is the one that a lot of people will probably look at as being the more obvious one. With this type of panel, it's 120 Hz, and I love that panel a lot. It's a great one, 1200 nits of brightness, and I liked it back in 2021. Clearly now it's not that great of a panel. The thing I've always had kind of issues with their flip phones is that for the price that you're paying for in the brand new market, they're really not that great of a phone in terms of a display. Because when you look at even the Galaxy S21 of that year, this phone and that phone are roughly around the same price, and you're getting a way better display inside of a Galaxy S21 rather than this thing. But this phone still looks fine. I guess it's just like the technology behind the display that I'm not the biggest fan of, if that kind of makes sense. Now beyond that, still a good looking display nonetheless, and I think it's a good looking phone, almost every single way. On the bottom of this phone, you are getting a USB Type-C port, which looks great. I love having USB-C, and it's a very, very cool thing going on for this particular phone too, which is awesome. On the sides, the phone still looks great. I still like this phone a lot from that side as well. And on the back side, you're basically getting this like frosted glass back. So this was something I actually liked a lot about this particular phone. The fact that you were getting this frosted glass back on this type of device, which I thought was super cool. Right? I think if you're going through and getting a phone, you kind of need to have a frosted glass back in it in this day and age. And that was something that was very, very cool with this type of phone. So you're getting wireless charging on this particular device. You are also getting a reverse wireless charging on this phone too, which is another really nice touch. And there's some really nice things on the outside of this phone that I actually like a lot. But there are probably a few downsides of this phone just to kind of keep in mind. And some of the big things that you're missing out on this phone that a lot of phones have nowadays, you're not getting a triple camera setup on this phone, which is kind of a downside. You're also not getting like a super bright display that a lot of phones are giving you nowadays as well. And one of the biggest things that a lot of phones are giving you now are like massively long software updates. This phone is also not going to be experiencing that either. So right off the top of my head, those are three things that we kind of covered so far that this phone is kind of lacking that a lot of modern phones of this day and age kind of have. In terms of the price tag of this phone, you can probably buy it for like less than $200 in a lot of places. So these phones have depreciated quite a bit, which is nice. You don't want these phones lasting, being super expensive for super long periods of time. So that is something that's kind of nice going on for this particular device, which is something I actually like a lot. If I'm going through and buying something like a, Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3, I like the fact that this phone doesn't cost as much as it used to. And this in and of itself is another very, very nice thing going on for this particular phone. So from that side in and of itself, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. Now, from the camera perspective, you are getting a dual camera setup on the back of this thing like I mentioned before. So you're getting a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, then you're getting a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now, the thing I will tell you about this particular phone and, the good stuff going on for this phone at this moment is the fact that you are getting 4K 60 on the front and the back. The front camera is a 10 megapixel sensor. Actually, you're only getting 4K 30 on the front of this camera. So this in and of itself can be another downside for some people out there. Like if you're wanting a better camera, you might not be getting that on this particular phone. I mean, again, another advantage that a lot of phones are giving you nowadays is 4K 60 on the front. In fact, most phones nowadays are giving you 8K on the back, for a lot of modern Samsung Galaxy phones. And again, the fact that this phone is not giving you that type of capability is a very, very sad thing. And I do think for a lot of people, including myself, that is a pretty big downside. If you're going through and buying a phone, I'd expect it to have that type of capability in some form or fashion. And it is a little bit of a downside that you're not getting that on this phone. So take that as you will, but this in and of itself is another pretty big downside of this particular device. when it comes down to it in and of itself. But beyond that, it's still a good camera. There's still going to be lots of things to love about it, and I do think it's a good device for the most part. But as I said before, you're probably going to be getting a significantly better camera inside of something like the Samsung Galaxy S23, S22, S21 even, than this particular camera, and even from this day and age. So from that side in and of itself, that kind of covers it up here for the most part as well. Now on top of that, another big thing to keep in mind here is the software updates. And like I mentioned, this was one of the bigger downsides of this particular phone when it came down to it. For this particular device, you're kind of stuck in a situation where this phone is still kind of supported with software, I'm sure, but it's not really going to be lasting compared to, a majority of phones that we are getting nowadays. A lot of the phones in this day and age are giving you significantly better experiences from the software perspective than this particular device. And this in and of itself can be one of the biggest downsides if you're going through and buying a phone like this, because you're already getting a device that could be, ending its software support sooner than later. I don't know if you want to be one of those types of people who get stuck in a situation where your device that you have, you're basically stuck in this weird spot where your device just isn't going to be giving you software updates as it probably should. So that is kind of a sad thing. I do feel like there's probably better phones and better options out there for the average person. And this is one of those devices that I'd look at and be like, I don't know if you want to be stuck with this phone per se. And as I said, you might be in a better spot if you want to go and buy a phone that is going to be giving you a better experience in a majority of different ways rather than this one. So take it as you will, but from a software perspective, that's kind of one other thing to keep in mind. Now, from the performance side, this phone is going to be giving you that Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 chipset inside of it with 8 gigabytes of RAM. So I do think this is a very, very good performing device. And, for that 888 chipset inside, it's a good device for the most part. I think it's a good phone. I think it had a lot of capability when it first came out. Is it the best performing device of all time? Clearly not. There's obvious issues with it. But I would say for the most part, this device chipset was very, very decent. I had a very good time with this particular chipset when it first came out. And I would still say for the most part, if you're trying to go through and use the device on an everyday basis, this is not a bad option, right? I do think for the most part, you can actually go through and still have a very, very good time with this particular phone from a performance perspective. And I've seen lots of people play games and emulators and all sorts of stuff with this particular device when it kind of comes down to it. So I do think from that side alone, that's a pretty big thing. But I do think from the other side, when you're looking at this particular phone, maybe from how it holds up today, it's not going to be the best performing device. A lot of phones nowadays are going to be giving you multiple more gigabytes of RAM than this thing, even like the base Galaxy S24. So that's kind of one thing to keep in mind. On top of all those things, you're getting a 3300 mAh battery inside of this phone, which really isn't that great compared to some of the competition nowadays too. So the one thing I would tell you about this particular phone, and to kind of bring this thing home, I am pretty sure that the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 4 or Z Flip 3 is one of those devices that probably wouldn't be that excited to kind of recommend people to buy. I think it's a good phone. I think it has some good capability and some good, qualities for it. But I don't know if this would be a phone that I would look at and be like, oh, you have to buy it. This is one of those devices that I look at and I think is a good phone for the most part. And, there's not really too much to hate on here. But there are obvious, phones that I'd recommend more than this thing. Even like a Samsung Galaxy S21, I think is a better device than this thing for the most part too. This one doesn't make a lot of sense to buy unless you really like a phone that folds. For the most part, if you're in the vicinity of buying a phone, you might as well go ahead and buy something like a Samsung Galaxy S21, a Galaxy S22, or one of those types of phones rather than buying this device when it comes down to it. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.